watching, press the share button and then select broadcast settings. Awesome sauce. So I'm going to imagine what's happening is I am live on Twitch right now. Excellent. So I'm going to convey what I want to convey, which means I'm turning off I'm making the volume very low so I can be heard. Good afternoon, good night, good evening. I'm here to talk about the sequel to the game I'm using as background today. So I've obtained my PlayStation, and I did what I said I would do. I have both games, and I have played the second one. Let me inform you, this happened a couple of days ago, so I've let my feelings stew, and frankly, I went in there not knowing much, right? I and you know what? I'm actually not gonna move. I'm just gonna sit right here. I went into the game more or less completely blind, not knowing much of whatever the hell's happening, right? And let me tell you, I don't go into a game with the intentions of disliking or hating. I don't want it to see any games fail. You know, I'm a positive person. I want to see things succeed. The thing is, the only way I can logically see you being a fan of this second game is by lying to yourself and engaging in mental gymnastics. So, lo and behold, spoiler warning, the game's been out now, and I want to talk about some specifics because there's a lot of feelings that need to be conveyed. And yes, I have played the game. Now, I've done a bit of research after playing the game. I've watched a couple of reviews from well-known people. Angry Joe, what's that name? What's that dude's name? John Jeremy. He does movies and games. Young Yeah, who I think had the best review personally. I've indulged in the Twitter. I've seen stuff from the writer himself, Neil Druckmann. I've been on subreddits, of which there are two. Only one of them I'm a fan of. And I just do not understand. So when you look at a game like this, right, this first one, I think it's something that you really absorb, right? You're witnessing this dude's journey, you're absorbing what's happening, and you leave it, having experienced something. And coming off of a legacy like this game and having a second game, you have a lot of expectations you're going to be living up to, right? This game, in my humble opinion, I played this game before the second one, obviously, to amp myself up. In my opinion, even with the knowledge of the second one being right around the corner for me, having already been out, I believe this game should not have gotten a sequel. I think its message was displayed perfectly, and an ending like that, I think ending the series off this first game would have been perfect. In fact, that's how I feel about a lot of games. For example, Telltale's Walking Dead. Even though it's called Season 1, I thoroughly believe it would have been best to end it at Season 1. Not saying I do not like the entire series. I like the entire Telltale's Walking Dead game series. But personally, I feel it would have had the strongest impact possible if you left it at the first one. So what I believe happened here is a game that was simply too good to have a sequel. And frankly, I believe it didn't deserve to have a sequel, given the ending. I think the ending and the amount of valid questions it leaves with the player, but at the same time questions that are answered, I think it ends well enough to not be seen as a cliffhanger and to be a solid conclusion, given what we had just experienced. So then the sequel happens. I didn't read anything. I played the game completely. I did it in 2 sessions. I burnt through a lot of potential sleep finishing it in the second section. I don't remember when I got off. All I know is I passed out, and then I completed it on the second time I got on. And frankly, coming off of, I reserve all judgment on a game for the end. If it's a story-focused game, regardless of whatever the hell happens throughout the game, I don't care. Let's see how this thing concludes. Let's wrap this up and then give our opinions. I played the game through completion to really formulate my thoughts. And frankly, I was lying to myself. I didn't come off satisfied, happy. I didn't feel like I really got a conclusion. And then I started trying to understand and trying to sympathize. Once again, after I had beaten the game, I didn't look up things. so I had just experienced it. I didn't hear what majority of the people were talking about being either the positives or the negatives. And I was trying to understand. I was talking with my friends after having beaten it, and I simply couldn't wrap my head around what happened. And I tried to sympathize with, the writers. I tried to say, well, maybe the direction these dudes are going for, maybe I'm just not seeing it. Hold on. Because I won't deny, and this is something I still believe in after having beaten it, I believe what they went for was bold. And I fully, fully respect the effort that was made. But I think it was going for Mission Impossible. So, let me indulge in slaw and get into specifics. Spoiler warning, but let's be honest, the only people watching this are people that already know me. So, I think what the game aims for falls flat on its head and kills itself. Look, everyone expected things like Joel dying in a sequel game, right? And this was one of the first things I was lying to myself with. After I beat it, I looked back to the cataclysm of the game, which is essentially Joel dying, our handsome man right here. And I tried to think to myself, these post-apocalyptic games, I really like how most times, maybe not most times, but oftentimes they treat death very matter-of-fact. No one gets like a dramatic going out in a blaze of glory. Heck, sometimes you don't even have time to mourn someone's death because of, the sudden how would I say this? How immediate it happens. Maybe that person dies in front of you and something bad's going on. No time to build a grave or really even dwell on it. You have to keep moving on. And frankly, that's how they did Joel. What happened was the shock of, oh my God, Joel's dead just like that, and that's how it happened, and we witnessed all of it. And I didn't look at any of the advertisements for the game, but I figured, and I talked to my friends about this, I said, so I'm going to take a guess that most of the advertisements for this game did not portray it to be what it actually was. Because, frankly, advertising a game like The Last of Us 2 and not blatantly lying to people and then expecting them to still invest, having commitment in this game and frankly even caring about it would have been impossible. Lo and behold, my hypothesis was shown to be true as I look up trailers and such and see blatant lies. Now understand this. Obviously, trailers for games and movies cannot reveal everything to you. They can't. Heck, sometimes they do, but they do it in ways where you couldn't have even imagined that being close to the end or the end itself, right? Lo and behold, what happened advertising this game wasn't just hiding stuff, it was straight lying. Straight lying. And if you need to lie to people in your trailer, that isn't bold. What that shows is a supreme lack of confidence. If you're confident in what you're selling here, you might not make it blatantly obvious, but to resort to lying is a level is a consistency of coleslaw I have not seen in a game that I cared about. Now, what I feel what's happening here, and obviously I'm not a 7-year-old diehard The Last of Us fan. I'm someone who kind of just got thrust into this whole universe in less than probably a fortnight, less than 2 weeks, and I am and was fully invested. And having come off of the second game, I feel like I was robbed. Now, once again, intentions of a game are going to be really up to the person when it comes to games like these. When it comes to a game like The Walking Dead, when it comes to a game like The Last of Us Part 1, frankly, although it's pretty much unanimously praised, people still have maybe some issues with our character here, which I think is good. I think when a character like Joel, or say Kenny from The Walking Dead, and the reason why I keep bringing it up is because those two games The Last of Us and Walking Dead, are often compared to one another. I never see them compared with anything else, so I'll compare and contrast characters from both games. When a character like Kenny is controversial and debated on, it shows that there's a level of depth to him that is really well thought. Same with Joel in some instances, although mass majority I'd say all love Joel as a character. None of us can deny that some of the stuff that he's done, maybe not stuff that we've experienced as a player, but that's hinted at in the 20 years that pass at the start of the game, it's shown in some of his actions. Now, here is the thing that here's where things quickly fall apart regarding this second game. Having playing it, it instantly falls apart when literally half of the game is about me playing as this dude's killer. Now, I'll get into why this falls flat very quickly. It falls flat there. That's probably the first... Okay. You'll have to excuse me. I don't really write things up. I like going with no script. I predicted that there would be 3 parts of this game that would be talked about after coming off of it. And this was before I really finalized my thoughts, because I feel at this point my thoughts are already set in stone and, you can't change my mind anymore. I figured, after having played it, that there would be 3 points of heavy discussion. Joel's demise is what I'm going to call it. The entire section of you playing as Abby, and the ending of the game. Being either the process of the boss fight itself, or, obviously the conclusion. Look. The theme of the game is painfully obvious. And frankly, the theme of both games might be obvious. The reason the first game got so much praise is that what the story was, in a literal sense, was nothing special. The way it was told was believable, something that had you invested in these characters and in this universe, and you weren't left confused, you were left feeling, final, like a conclusion was reached, and what you experienced was, incredible to witness, to experience, to feel on an emotional level. And it was something that truly had you invested all the way through. And that's not easy. What needs to be done in order to achieve that is, excellent writing, a level of depth added to the characters and the world, and meaningful interactions, either between those that we know or those that, we might be going against. And everything in this first game does it right. Now, obviously, The Last of Us is known for its story, and that's what we're going to be aiming to look for in the second one. Gameplay-wise, both games play out almost exactly the same, which is either a good or bad thing depending on who you ask. In my opinion, I think it's an okay thing, as in I like the gameplay from both, and I like the small levels that they do to improve it in the second one, but it very obviously does not innovate, and they play almost exactly the same, which could also mean that they're, sort of being lazy, because in a sequel you should always be seeking to innovate, because nothing is perfect. You should always be trying to elevate, right? Now, from a story perspective, the second game fails in almost every instance that I can think the first game succeeds. Quite frankly, when I'm thinking of The Last of Us Part 2, when you don't just call it 2, you call it Part 2, I'm imagining it's going to be a sequel to people that we've known, right? And I know this might seem slight, but I think it's very important. When I look at games, I usually in their sequels, it's usually Game 2, Game 3, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Dead Space 2, Dead Space 3. No, this wasn't The Last of Us 2. This was The Last of Us Part 2, which I imagine meant a Part 2 to the people that we knew in this second game. Once again, I went in unspoiled. And I didn't have problems with what was going on because I wanted to give it a chance. Having completed it, I had to lie to myself. Here's where I'm going to answer what I mean by I had to lie to myself. I feel the only way to thoroughly enjoy The Last of Us Part 2 as a true lover, as a true fanatic of the first game, is to indulge in mental gymnastics and completely disregard elements of the first game. Meaning you must lie to yourself. And quite frankly, I'm not going to lie to myself to enjoy something that I truly, from the bottom of my heart, wanted to enjoy. But I can't. It's impossible. So let me address some of the things that I've read and my thoughts on them. So I've seen slaw from both sides. I've looked at the Democrats and I've looked at the Republicans, and I'm definitely on the Republican side of this game regarding its fan base. So what I've seen from the Democratic side is criticism is often relegated to a couple things, like a checklist, you could say. If you don't like this game, you are either a racist, you are either a sexist, you are either a misogynistic pig, you wanted a fairy tale-like game, you wanted Joel and Ellie Cross America Part 2, you are a blind sheep, you are a blind follower who just followed the hate train that this game came off of regarding the leaks, you haven't played the game, which I find to be one of the funniest things. I have seen so many discussions happen where literally these dudes say, "There's no way you played this game." Excuse me? How are we going to be in denial of a person playing the game or not? And in fact, regardless, when it comes to a game like this, where obviously gameplay isn't, the selling point, it doesn't really matter if someone played the game. Now, I know, I'm someone who says the experience from player to audience member is drastically different. However, that was with, The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead is a game very, very, very light on gameplay, heavy story. In The Last of Us, one thing that I think puts it a step ahead, and I'm talking about part 1. When I'm talking about part 2, I'll say part 2. When I think about The Last of Us, this game has gameplay that also backs up its story and vice versa, The gameplay in The Last of Us is very intense, even though it's simplistic. So I think, excuse me, the player to audience member and how that what's it called? How that shifts your thoughts on the game could matter to an extent, but obviously people's issues weren't with the gameplay of the game. In fact, everyone almost unanimously agrees that the gameplay of it is good, it's passable, and, if it does a few things better than the first, then sure, maybe you could even say it's great. But what everyone's talking about is the story of this game. Now, let me tell you, once again, what they went for was bold, and I respect the attempt fully. But it was mission impossible. In order to like this game, you have to lie to yourself. What happened in the second game in part 2 was character assassination, dehumanization, or dehumanizing, whatever the heck, monetization, my horrible way with words and not being able to say them. When I'm left with so many why questions, I can't call it good writing. It just doesn't, what happens isn't believable. There are too many coincidences. There are too many, wow, how lucky is that? There are too many cliches. There's too many cartoon-like moments that don't make any sense. So here is where the game failed for me. Personally, for me, when I was playing the game failed when I had to play half of the game as this dude's killer. Now, once again, this is also a part where I tried to mentally debate myself, saying, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I need to understand it from this no. I'm going to understand it from my perspective, and from my perspective, it doesn't make any sense what they were trying to go for. Look. Because once again, maybe this shows what the person was going for, what our friend Neil Druckmann was going for. When you start the game off with us witnessing Joel getting murdered, he gets butchered. Not butchered, because butchered implies like dismembering, cutting off. No, he gets tortured to death and killed in a brutal fashion in front of Ellie, who is pleading, sobbing, as she sees Tommy is KO'd, his brother, and she sees Joel getting murdered. Now, from us as a player to Ellie as a character, I think this hits us both in similar ways. From this point on, as a player, we're disgusted, maybe we're shocked. Unfortunately for me, and I imagine many others, and from what I see, and indeed many others, there isn't much real heavy emotional pull into Joel's death, because it's just so sudden, right? I think what they went for was true shock factor. Here's Joel, and this is what's going to happen to him, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And to a level, it's bold, it's brave, right? To do this. But then what happens in the game just doesn't... Things just aren't believable for us as a player and for what's happening for the characters. What the game seems to attempt to do is make you... Okay, what it obviously does is it looks at things from different perspectives and just sees how differently things played out for people, right? The simple act of Joel saving Ellie and that catalyst effect it had regarding this girl's future, Abby, and frankly then what happened to him. And people could say that what he got was karma. Here's the thing. I am fully on board on the Joel did nothing wrong train, and I don't believe that this was karma. Now let me explain why. Because for some reason this is even a debate. People say that Joel doomed humanity. Wrong. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but this is just wrong. Look, one of the things that I think has this game being so controversial is, obviously, stuff like this and how people taste a story is opinionated, right? There is no right and wrong. This is one of, if not the only instance where I legit cannot see there being an opinion. And I talked to my boy, and he made it clear to me, before I played it, that there shouldn't be a debate on this game. The criticism is based off of facts and logic. There is no factual way to like the second game. So let me indulge. Joel did nothing wrong. How is that possible? First things first, yes, we know Joel isn't a perfect human being. Lee isn't a perfect being either. When we start The Last of Us with Joel losing his daughter Sarah, 20 years later, we start The Walking Dead with Lee in a cop car and he murdered someone, and he's heading to prison likely. Throughout the course of the game, it's implied that Joel has done some bad things to get to where he is, to get the knowledge that he has, to get the survival skills that he is needed to live just that long. But he still finds a redemption through Ellie. And in the end, at the conclusion of the game, what he does can be seen as a bad thing, but it's just not. I'm sorry. Factually, it's not. And this is where both games clash, because really this is, the moment where I guess you could even say Abby is introduced, right? So, Joel has to kill the surgeon to save Ellie. That surgeon just so happens to be Abby's father. Abby then goes... She builds herself into this weapon of destruction. With her obsession, she has an obsession with avenging her father. And we see through these flashback sequences, a bit more into the character. We see the moments before the operation was going to happen. And it's all made in an attempt to have us really understand, to have us feel, to have us care, to see that they weren't just... these people that killed Joel weren't just psychopathic murderers. They had a motive, and here was their motive, and look what Joel did. Unfortunately, once again, Joel did nothing wrong. Nobody Joel kills in the game, he does because he wants to. He does because he is forced to. What do you mean he was forced to kill the surgeon? I'm sorry. He was. How do they even cross paths? Ellie has drowned. He's resuscitating her. They finally meet up with the Firefly, someone who we've been hearing from the start of the game, whose incompetence has been shown drastically throughout the game's progress. All these people are getting butchered left, right, and center, and they've been diminished to this small, tiny faction. And the way we finally meet at the end of the game is Joel is trying to resuscitate a just drowned Ellie, trying to make her regain consciousness. They then knock him out. He wakes up to the ultimatum of Ellie needs to die in order for us to make a vaccine. He's not gonna let that happen. Joel butchers... Sorry, I gotta stop saying butcher, because butcher paints a different image. Joel kills everyone that gets in his way to getting Ellie. The surgeon that Joel kills, who's Abby's father, is the only surgeon Joel has to kill, because he's pointed a scalpel at a man that has just killed every armed guard in this hospital. You can do whatever you see as a player to stop him. You could shoot him in the head like I did. You could shoot him in the hand, you can shoot him in the foot, you can take out his knee, wink wink. It doesn't matter, the surgeon dies immediately. If you want me to sympathize with the real main character of The Last of Us Part 2, what happens needs to be believable, and the message isn't conveyed, okay? There are things that could have happened regarding how they did this operation that could have made it so I actually felt Joel was in the wrong. Maybe if they didn't knock out Joel while he was trying to first just simply save the girl, two, give him the ultimatum: if she needs to die, this is gonna happen. If you try to stop this, we're gonna kill you. Three, once I get to the operating room, literally force my hand, pointing a dang scalpel at me like, how dare you? You need to go. Maybe here's what they could have handled better. Perhaps not be so incompetent as to nearly ruin all the plans by having this girl dead on arrival because she had just drowned. Did you know that the plans actually originally were to kill Joel and then just take Ellie? So really, they didn't even enact their plans correctly, further showing their incompetence, as Joel should have been shot dead on the street rather than knocked out. But once again, these people don't know what they're doing. Maybe wait just a couple of days to really think out what you're going to do, because if it grows all over the brain, I've noticed, Ellie's head seemed kind of fine to me. Where did she get bitten in the arm? You're telling me, how long did they have them? Less than an hour? I would imagine so, right? You're telling me you couldn't let her wake up, maybe get consent, any of that nonsense. No, you had to immediately force things and literally force this poor man's hand into doing what he did. The surgeon got everything that he deserved, and Joel didn't do a single thing wrong. He did not doom humanity. Ellie shouldn't be mad at him because he didn't even explain what happened properly, which is just, once again, showing pure character assassination through the writing of the second game. But I'm not going to harp on this because I don't want to talk about things that have been said a million times. You've heard this already. I want to talk about how I was impacted and, why I was impacted the way I was. And a lot of this I learned in hindsight because first playthroughs just aren't a thing for me. The level of character assassination that happens in this second game, I mean, it's like completely different human beings. Angry Joe encompassed it perfectly in that opening skit as to how this dude, Tommy, has doomed everybody. There is something really funny in part 2, how you can legit view Tommy, Joel's brother, as the main antagonist because this dude started every bad thing that happened to the set of characters in this game. Tommy doomed he sealed Joel's fate. What's it called? After everything that had happened, after we go through 20 hours of gameplay, and then we get into the sequence where Ellie finally has what seems to be some closure for her and her own family, and then Tommy, looking like a proper hobo, comes in a complete 180 shift of character, saying, we need to get back on this mission. What, you're not gonna go with me? What's wrong with you? It just doesn't make sense. And people said it perfectly. The characters in this game, every single one of them, from the ones that we like, to the ones that we love, to the ones that we hate, there are no characters in this game. They are just tools to drive this game's message. And that isn't how it should be. It should be the reverse, okay? Literally. No character in this game makes any sense. Tommy doesn't make sense. The short instance of Joel we have doesn't make sense. In fact, even in some of the flashbacks where he's trying to talk to Ellie, it doesn't make sense how he's just not conveying things the way they need to be said. And yet it somehow does make sense at the same time, right? He doesn't view it as he killed everyone in the hospital to save Ellie. No, he views it as he saved her. Because that's what he did. They forced his hand and got what they deserved. And he did what he needed to do. Ellie didn't want to sacrifice her life for humanity. Was she ever asked before she was on the operating room? No. Did they think getting all the way to that hospital meant Ellie needed to die to save the world? No. All of this happens in hindsight. So unfortunately, you can't even use the argument of, well, Ellie wanted it, Joel didn't do what she wanted, he's the bad guy. No, she doesn't know what she wanted. None of us do, okay? You can't force me to care. I think I understand that some of the people in this game think it's unfair to judge the game when a lot of it simply is the opinion of we didn't care. I think this is one of those rare instances where a player not caring is perfectly justified because you cannot make me care about Abby without making me lie to myself. If you start the game that strong, all I'm going to see is blood red for the rest of the game until I get my hands around her throat. And that's what happened. All the way up to the climactic moment. To then rob me, rob me, rob me of what's gonna happen. To return to it 10 plus hours later. And then make me play as her to destroy those that I care about. And then have further actions still not make sense. It just makes for a story that leaves me as a player confused and pissed off. Confused in the sense that how nobody in this story behaved rationally or normally, and upset that there was no closure for anybody. It makes... I'll list off a quick few bullet points of things that do not make sense for the characters. Tommy identifying him and his brother to this armed group of strangers that they are surrounded by makes no sense. Let's see. The Fireflies, the surgeon, coming to the decision that Ellie needs to die in order for a cure to happen, less than an hour into even getting their hands on them, makes no sense. Sorry, there's so many to think of, but I don't want to list them all to you. The amount of times that Ellie and Dina get away with their lives make no sense. The fact that Abby spares Ellie and Dina makes no sense. If you wanted her... If you wanted it to make sense, to make any sense at all... Oh, how could I forget it as well? Them sparing Ellie and Tommy after having butchered sorry, I gotta stop saying butchered. Murdering Joel in front of them make no sense. If you want the story to make sense, if you want your story to make any form of sense up to this point, everyone established needed to have died. In that theater, what should have happened was Jesse should have died, which he did. I'm sorry. Tommy should have died, which he didn't, after being shot in the back of the head. Ellie should have died, and Dina should have had her throat cut out. But none of this happens because, once again, even for characters that we hate, character assassination happens to them. And nothing makes sense because, once again, there are no characters in The Last of Us Part 2. They are all just tools to drive a theme of revenge being bad, Ellie being bad, and look at what happened to poor Abby. But unfortunately, I don't care. I couldn't care. You couldn't make me care. When I got to Abby's portion of the game and I realized that half of this game was going to be me playing as this strong woman, I couldn't care. I wanted it to be over with for all 10 hours. Every flashback just made me more infuriated. You can't make me care because nothing makes sense. Mel, you're like 7 months pregnant. Stay at home. Everyone failed you, Mel. Ashley Birch, sorry. Your character was assassinated. Owen fails. The sex scene fails. Abby fails. The surgeon fails. Everyone in this game fails. Lev fails. His sister fails. His mother fails. It fails in the story, and it fails at having impact. I don't care. Manny fails. So, real quick, real touch up on Manny. Manny is the Mexican person. The Mexican dude. The dude who constantly says pendejo. For a game that is so widely talked about at its inclusivity, its progressiveness, why am I not seeing things like Manny's racist Mexican caricature being talked about? Manny is literally a walking stereotype. This dude, the for a game that's so inclusive with having no, stop. This game, I don't think this game is pushing an agenda, but from what I've read, once again, I've done some studying, people harp on this game being very inclusive. How is Manny the Mexican burrito eating pendejo Trump? Literally, it's so funny because it sounds like comedy. This dude Manny is literally a racist stereotype. He eats burritos and only swears in Spanish to remind us that he is Mexican. Ignoring that, and just how silly it is, I can't care. I don't care. And when I researched it more, there was stuff in the game that I thought was just cool detail that was actually there to further drive the point, which means it tried and failed again, because I didn't care. What I'm talking about is, apparently the reason why near enough every NPC in this game that we viciously slaughter as either Ellie or Abby or whoever the hell else, the reason why they all have names is to make us feel like, they're people too. They're not just psychopathic killers, yada yada yada. I don't care. You tried and failed. I don't care about Abby or anybody she's affiliated with because you started the game off so strong. When you start the game with the only established characters, the ones that I think this game is going to be revolving around, watching Joel get just executed, holding us down, having Ellie plead through tears, pleading to not do this, and then finish it off just like that. It is literally impossible for a redemption to be had for them. There's no way on Jehovah's green earth that I could care without lying to myself. The fact that people are saying that they actually humanized Abby disgusts me. I'm sorry, it's disgusting, because once again, you have to be lying to yourself. What they do to Abby isn't anything unique. Sure, we get some background, we get some time with her daddy, who we later learn is just as evil as we thought he was in the first game. We get some time with her friends, who we later learn are just as much as a-holes as Abby herself. This Abby and Owen thing. Mel is pregnant with this dude's seed, and what do we have? Both of them, with the knowledge of this, start touching no-nos. What? 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 What else? I already mentioned the burrito eater. What else? Because I'm sorry, but my head's all over the place because that's what this game is, all over the place. Sorry, the second game, not this game. No, not this game. This second one is just all over the place. What's another... I'm trying to think of another one. I apologize for this. The dog, making me play fetch with the dog, I don't care. It jumped on me. You forced my hand. It had to go. I just... It just doesn't work. Oh, I remember what I was going on. Yes, what they do to humanize, I say this in massive air quotations, Abby, doesn't work. You could do what they did to Abby to literally any character. Let's say David from this game, from The Last of Us. David, you meet him in the winter section. That dude with Ellie. At first, he seems like a normal dude, who we later learn he's implied to be a cannibal and a child rapist. Neither of which are presented. We don't see these things. They are just heavily, and I mean heavily, implied. Why don't we do a nice background on David and see his life and where he's came from and how his hand has been forced. No, it's impossible because the damage is done. Once again, I respect what they were going for, but it is literally an impossible task. And I'm sorry to say this, but if you like this game and what it does and how it does it, you're lying to yourself. There's no other way to put it. This is simply one of those situations that I cannot find any sympathy. The second game just drags, it disappoints, and it robs. At every turn, our characters just failing to make sense given their actions, failing to react appropriately. You fail to make me sympathize because it's impossible to sympathize, okay? There is no people like to harp on the fact that, you know, when Abby has Ellie and Dina at their mercy, you know, she could have killed Dina, but Lev stopped her. That once again doesn't make any sense. And even if Lev didn't exist, it's shown that she would have no problems doing what she needs to do. You failed at making Ellie look like a bad person because Ellie just did things when they were forced upon her. Okay? Is revenge good? No. But does revenge make sense? Yes. You can't make Ellie's revenge seem bad when she just doesn't do anything wrong. Here's the thing. Joel dying, I don't have a problem with. But even Abby's quest for revenge doesn't make sense. Because it's established through the game that Abby isn't retarded. I'm gonna say it. It's established that Abby isn't stupid. You know, she's a human who can think for herself. You're telling me that her father's fetch quest, this hopeful whim of making a vaccine from this infection, and then getting his just desserts, you know, the knowledge of his death, creating this obsession in her head of avenging her dad, at not one point does she reflect and think of her dad being just as bad as the person she wants dead? The surgeon is, I'm sorry, the surgeon is much worse than Joel, in a literal sense and in a moral sense. The surgeon is evil, and he had to die. In fact, he forced our hand. And then people look at how Joel kills Marlene. Marlene didn't have to die, I'm sorry, but yes she did. Now hold on, what do you mean yes she did? Am I saying Joel should have went out of his way to kill her? No. And in fact, Marlene would have lived. But what did Marlene do? She got in the way. So she had to die. Once again, Joel did nothing wrong. And so the message of the game fails. Because Joel did nothing wrong. Did he get what he deserved? Sure, maybe. Sure, I guess. Did Ellie do anything wrong? No. Did Abby do anything wrong? I guess not. No. But then the way they carry out their actions just doesn't make any sense. You can't tell me Ellie slaughters nameless people with no remorse, but then as soon as she reaches one of the people she's been hunting down, she suddenly is so heavily impacted at her actions. You can't make me sympathize with Abby after excuse me, after she does what she does to Joel, and then is about to do to Dina, and make her seem like a good person. Because no, Abby is exactly what I think she is. A psychopathic killer who fails at her mission. She doesn't get any closure from killing Joel. And so all of it is pointless. And then the conclusion of the game. Did I even touch about the conclusion of the game? The conclusion of the game doesn't make sense. Ellie traveling that far to then challenging this. In fact, Ellie even leaving in the first place doesn't make any sense. Tommy strong-arming her into doing this makes no sense for his character. So once again, some nice character assassination. And then to throw her life away essentially at this last chance to get some redemption. Maybe not closure, because it's been shown through the game that revenge doesn't bring closure. But to get some redemption, a sense of fulfillment, and then challenge this girl to a dramatic duel on the beach, finally get the upper hand, and then let go and have her walk off is just one last bit of character assassination, leaving us with an actual cliffhanger, so many questions, and just a sour taste in the mouth. And not a sour taste that we can later look on as a good one, like we can with The Last of Us, like we can with The Walking Dead, Season 1 specifically. No. What we're left with is that sour taste, disappointment, and that feeling of having your house broken into while you're sleeping and robbed. The Last of Us 2 felt like a robbery. It felt like a fan fiction that came to life. Everything I heard about The Last of Us 2 was true. They Walking Dead the game. And I want to deny its canon. I want them to do what they did with the 3 sequel movies of Star Wars. And I will remind you yet again, I don't want that to happen because Joel dies. I don't want that to happen because I don't get to kill Abby. I want it to happen because what I played did not make sense. The Last of Us 2 doesn't make sense. And in fact, I think that's what I'm going to title the video. That's if any of this was even recorded. And hey, if it wasn't, that means I can formulate my thoughts more organized. That's it. I'm done. I'd like to keep talking about this game, but with less of a rambly type, like I did here. I don't want to play The Last of Us 2 again, but unfortunately I might have to play it just one more time. A second playthrough, to try and have it make sense, but it won't. So I'm going to finish playing the first one another time, and many more times, to feel good. When the only good parts of the second game are ones that remind me of the first game, that means the new material fails, and it's failed as a game. When you dangle good character development and writing and sequences in flashback sequences, and not in the actual chronologically correct timeline, that means you failed. You can't dangle a section like the museum bit with Joel and Ellie and then have the rest of the game proceed and fail when the flashback sequences show that the talent is still there. I'm so sorry to the true fans of the game. You didn't get what you were owed. Nobody did. FN bundles, man. Scam artists. Now how do I close this? The broadcast has started. To stop broadcasting, press the share button and then select broadcast settings. I think I'm gonna bounce out with that fofo. Yeenie pie yeet. Wow, man. You're as stubborn as a damn mule.